All right, now I want to build the chassis. So this is the portion of the car that the wheels are attached to, and also what the brain is going to attach to and what the motor unit is going to attach to. All right, so the pieces that I need, I've got a red channel like this. It's a short red one. I got 4 black bushings. I got 4 1-inch standoffs, and I think these are the 5-inch axles. One of the 36 tooth gears. We got 4 collars and then some 1/2-inch bolts and nuts and some 3/8-inch bolts, but you could use all 1/2-inch bolts, and then 4 wheels. Okay, so the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to get my bushings on here. All right, and the bushings are pretty straightforward. We're going to have one end of the car be the front and one end of the car be the back, and I'm going to do the front of the car right now. The front of the car, the bushing goes on at the very end, and I'm going to put a hole, or I'm going to put my bolt right through the middle hole of that bushing. Put my nut on the other side, which can be a little frustrating. What I usually do with these is I put the bolt through, put my finger on it so the bolt doesn't slide out, and then I'm right-handed, so I take the nut in my right hand and start it and spin it on. And I don't tighten anything up until I got all 4. So I'm going to do the same thing to the other side. I'll put my bushing on, hold it with my finger. You'll notice I'm always using my left hand to hold stuff. Put the bolt through it, put my finger on top of that, put the nut on, cinch it down. So this is the front side where we got a bushing on either side with the bolt going through the middle hole. Okay, now I'm going to spin it around to the back. And for the back, we're going to put the bushing in the same place, but this time it's going to get 2 bolts. One through the one end, one through the other, and the middle is open. And I'm going to put 2 fingers on those so they don't fall through. And the same thing, I'm going to get the nuts started on each one of those bolts. Okay, and then I'll switch to the other side. So here is my bushing. Got 1, 2, and you do have to use the 1/2-inch bolts for these. And notice again, I put the bushing on, I put the bolts through. I'm holding the head of the bolt with my fingers, 2 fingers, so that they don't come out. Then I'm just starting the nut on the bolts and then spinning it on. Okay, now I've got my 2 sides or 2 ends done with 4 bushings. On the front end of the car, the bushings are bolted through the middle hole. On the back end of the car, the bushings are bolted through the both ends, leaving the middle open. Now what I have to do is I have to tighten these up. So what I do is I put my finger on the nut so that it doesn't spin, and I just go through and move my finger from one nut to the next, tighten it up, switch sides. I just go down and I'm tightening these so that they don't loosen up. Okay, so now we've got our bushings on. Okay, now what we need to do is we need to get our standoffs on, and that are these pieces. Okay, and the standoffs are going to hold our robotic brain, and it's easiest to put these on before we start putting axles through here. So I'm going to do that now. Now the standoffs are in a very specific location so that they actually, match up with the brain. And I would suggest using either the 3/8-inch bolts or the 1/2-inch bolts for these. The 3/8-inch bolts are good. You could even use the 1/4-inch, but I find those are a little bit harder to use. And what I'm going to do on the bottom side, I'm going to be looking at the holes on the side, not the holes in the middle, the ones on the side. And what I want to do is I want to count 1, 2 holes and put my bolt through the 3rd hole from the bottom side. So there's my bolt through the 3rd hole on the bottom side. I'm going to put my finger on it, and now see that it's sticking through the top. I can take my standoff and just tighten it down with my finger just like that. Okay? I'm going to do the same thing. I want to put 2 standoffs right next to each other, so there's another one that needs to go through that hole. So I drop a bolt through, put a finger on it, take my standoff, thread it on, and screw it down. Okay? And I'll tighten these up in a minute. Now I have to do the back side. Now the backside standoffs have to be in the 6th hole from the back. So we're going to 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Okay, the 6th hole from the back, that's where my standoffs need to be. So I'm going to put my finger here, I'm going to turn it over, but I'm going to count again just to make sure. We got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. That hole right there is where my bolt has to go. And notice I'm not counting the middle holes, I'm counting the side holes. Okay, so the 6th hole, put my bolt through, my standoff on, and I'll double check right now because it'd be better to fix a mistake now than do it wrong and have to take a second one off. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 holes open. It's in the 6th hole, so that's good. I'll take my last bolt, I'll drop it through, put my finger on it so it doesn't fall out, take my last standoff, thread it on. This camera just won't focus. There we go. Okay, now I'm just going to go through and tighten everything down. Same way I did it with the nuts. I'm just going to hold on to the standoff with my finger, put my wrench on the bolt head, and just tighten it down so that it's tight. I'm not going to try to kill these things. They don't need to be super tight. Now we've got our chassis with everything that we need on it except for our axles, wheels, and gears. So let's do that now. Okay, so we will take our axle and let's do the front wheel first. The front wheels go through the front holes here, okay? Not the back one. We got a bolt there, so they go through the front. So I'll take my axle, I'll slide it through, just like that. Okay, and then we can take our wheel and put that on. And actually, you know what? I want to put a spacer on there. I forgot about this. So we take one of these small spacers, not the wide ones, the narrow ones. Put a small spacer on, put the wheel on, and I'm just going to leave just enough of the axle sticking out so I can put the collar on it and have no axle sticking out on the end. See that? No axle sticking out. And then I'm going to tighten this collar down right away. And the reason I'm going to do that is because it's much easier to work on this stuff if the wheels aren't falling off when you're doing it. So this side is on. Now I'll work on this side. We've got spacer, wheel, and collar. Collar on. And it looks like I have a little bit of extra poking off the side here. That's fine, as long as both collars are nice and tight and the wheels stay on. Looks pretty good. Nothing's coming off. And the wheels spin pretty freely. Focus. Okay, so that's the front side. The back side is very similar, but the only difference is that we're going to put a gear on one side instead of a spacer. Okay, and what we want to do is we want to have our motor unit sit on here with the gear on the right side, this side. So our gear needs to be on the right side as well. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put my axle through and I'm going to put my 36 tooth gear on the right side. Then I'll put a wheel on, make sure it's just sticking out enough to put a collar on, and I'll kind of finger tighten that down so that it doesn't fall off. Then I'll put a wrench on it and snug it down so it's good. Okay, now we got to do the other side, and I have lost my spacer, so I'm going to go find a spacer real quick. Okay, so got my spacer, found one, put that on, put my wheel on, and there's just barely anything sticking out the side here, just barely enough to put a collar on there. I mean we are right at the edge here, but it does work. It does hold. All right, and these wheels don't come off. So here's our chassis. We've got our standoffs to put our Cortex on. All right, we've got our wheels and axles, and we've got a gear on the right side in the back for our power unit. And I'll show you how to connect that next.